everybody, and welcome to the Quadcopter Review. I'm your host, Pepe Prawns, and as always, I'm going to ask you to like this video, share it on the social networks, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Subscribing helps us out a ton. Up here at the top, you're always going to be able to find the latest giveaways going on here at the channel. And with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get down to today's business. What we're going to do today is we're going to build a BQE Squeak. So the Squeak comes in 2-inch, 2.5-inch, and 3-inch. Basically, you're going to get different size arms depending on which one you order. I went with the 2-inch, so that's what we're going to go ahead and build. I just happen to have the parts around that are going to work with this. Now the first part I'm going to use in this build are the Diatone 1105 at 5500 kV motors. These are the Mamba 1105s. They are really nice motors. I'm going to use a Fox Ear Lollipop. We're going to use the Eachine VTX 03S, just a real decent, inexpensive VTX that has just worked forever, and it lets me just plug in the Lollipop easy peasy. So we're also going to use the Diatone Mamba Mini Stack, the F4 version. This is V1. There's a V2 out now where they've fixed some of the soldering pads, but these are excellent, inexpensive stacks. I use them pretty much almost exclusively at this point. So all these parts you'll find on at least the motors and the stack you're going to find in the Diatone 249, and that's why pretty much the reason why I'm using these parts is that was a good flying quad, and I know it can handle the weight of this little 2-inch. Now all the parts and pieces on the Squeak are 3mm, so your top plate, bottom plate, arms are all 3mm carbon fiber, so really thick stuff in the grand scheme of things. When you're talking 2-inch to 3-inch, sometimes they're around 2mm, which is just a little too thin to me. They break pretty easy. So as you can see, we get all the parts we need, all the carbon. We're going to get our 3D printouts and all of our accessories like nuts and such and bolts. So when you're going to build this, you're going to take this bottom plate here. The press pins are going to be the top inside, so what you're going to do is flip it over so you have the side without the press pin. That's going to be the bottom, and you're going to screw the center pin down of your arms, and then you'll screw the top two holes on both sides are going to go to your standoffs. So your standoffs, you're going to use your gnarled standoffs. So that's what you're going to be using there that are in your package, and pretty much let's put it in speed motion and show you how that's done. So as you can see, the nut is on the top. We place the two arms as such, screw down our center one using 8 arms like an octopus here, and line up the middle ones, and then get ready to put our standoffs on. We're just going to use this longer screw here is for the standoffs, and we go ahead and just going to hand press those in on the front and back so you can see how it looks with the bottom and top plate. And there we go, all set. Top plate will sit on there like such, the notch in the front, and the flat will be the back, and that's how she's going to look. So that's that part. The smaller bolts you're going to use for your accessories, like here are your camera printouts. That's where you're going to put your micro camera on, and your stack's going to go right there in the center. And let's go ahead and start mounting up all of our motors, because that's the first step in a build for me. Is I'm going to go ahead and mount down all my motors and get ready to start doing some soldering. I am going to use a 4S450 on this one as the battery source. So here we go. All the motors are on, wires are ready, and now we have our extra bolts here for our props and for mounting down the motors. So I'm probably going to wrap mine around, snip off the excess, just depending on how it goes here. So let's go ahead and crack open our stack. So as you can see, the stack here is pre-assembled. It's running a wiring harness holding the ESCs to the flight controller, so you do get an extra cable if you should happen to goof that cable up or anything. So here we are. Let's go ahead and dig out the rest of our goodies, because with this stack you're also going to get really good sheet. Actually, I won't even call it pretty good. Really good sheet, tells you what all the pads are for, what you're soldering down to. Another pretty good sheet that points out where everything is and kind of where you'd place your things. So it's kind of great for a new guy who doesn't know really where he's soldering what. So got our capacitor, got our extra ribbon cable in there, and we have our XT30. So first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and add my XT30 to the wiring and get that piece going once we go ahead and set our stack on there. So what I'm going to do is set the ESC stack down first and put it on there so I can start gauging out the length of my wiring. So we'll remove the flight controller from the ESC. Make sure we look for the two little pads there in the back. That is the back for your XT30. So let's go ahead and line it up. Center two holes so we can get our CG right. Once we line that up, we will go ahead and screw this baby down with the supplied screws. Actually, just depends. I always keep a set of these screws kicking around this box. I'll put it in the links below for any sizes that you may need. I think what I found here was that screws I had were a little too long, so this particular, the Mamba stack wasn't sitting flush to the carbon. It was actually being with the screw too long, it was sticking up and it kind of was flopping around. So I had to go into my screw drawer and pull out some screws. Not a big deal, but if you have this situation, it's good to keep that box of M2s kicking around so you can get the right size screws in there. So mount them up. Just going to solder in our positive and negative leads into our XT30. Going to slide a little heat shrink onto here, and then we'll go ahead and shrink that down and mount it up onto our ESCs. Little trick I use, depends on what you like to do. I just know if you can run your soldering iron up and down on that stuff as well. As long as you're gentle and don't hold it in one place for too long, you can shrink the shrink sleeve with your soldering iron as well. So let's go ahead and pre-tin up our ESCs. And we'll mount up our capacitor. First we got to snip off the excess wiring on our capacitor. Go ahead and get our positive and negative leads on. I'm going to add just an extra bit of solder so our capacitor sticks. Trim off these wires. Now remember that all these capacitors have a long line running down one side, and that will be your negative lead side. Go ahead and get this baby on there. They like to move around, or they like to make your wires come loose. A little bit of a trick, but you can get it done. On this particular one, that's how we're set, and we will go ahead and mount it onto the bottom plate to finish up that part. Alright, now we'll start tinning on all of our motor wires. So first one's there. As you can see, I pre-tinned the rest of the ESCs for the rest of these wires, trimming off the excess. I use a flux stick, and then I pre-tin all the way around. Pre-tin my wires, and then solder them all on as such, and we're good to go. Now we can use our cable to restrap on the flight controller to the ESC, and then we can follow our little guide here telling us where to solder in our VTX camera and other accessories we may or may not be using if you're using a buzzer or whatever. I like to use the grounds and the 5 volts, skipping them so I'm not soldering actually them side by side. Just make sure you don't use the ground that's the first one on your left side of this viewing. That first ground, I've had some experience where that ground isn't working, so in the version 1, which you probably won't even be able to find a version 1 anymore. So, however, that's what I like to do in order to keep my soldering, because they are pretty small pads and it's kind of hard to solder things like that closely, and if you can avoid it, it's always worth doing. So everything's soldered up over here for our VTX camera, etc., and I think you can see how I kind of kept the ground wires away from the hot wires, and that helps me to prevent bridging anything. We've got our little Foxer micro, and we've got that where I use an XM Plus pretty much almost exclusively, so that's in there as well and ready to be locked down, and everything is pretty much at this point good to go. All we got to do is test her out, so we'll use our smoke stopper and put that between our lead and our battery here. The smoke stoppers are like $5, and they're worth it. They'll save you a lot of headaches, a lot of burning up quads in most situations. They've been known to fail, here or there. I've heard some stories, but mine has never failed me. So plug that in, green light, we're good. As you can see, power is being passed on to the flight controller stack and everything else. So you can see my VTX is showing. We've got blinking lights on our receiver, and we are pretty much good to go. See, now at this point, I will connect to the goggles, my goggles to the VTX and the camera to make sure I can see. I will make sure that my receiver is actually connecting to my radio, and I do all those things before I button any of my builds up, so that it's something you just learn when you're building. That way you don't have to take it back apart when something likely doesn't work, because that happens often. So pretty much make sure everything's working in this state and run it through Betaflight in this state before I button it up. So with all that done, Betaflight set up, button it up, put some Avalons on here, and we're pretty much ready to test fly this joker. So what we'll do is we'll get this baby in the air. I'm going to either run top plate or bottom for my battery pending. I'm going to likely use a Firefly on the top, so if I do, it'll kind of get in the way here of my my battery. I'll have to run it below. So it is built, and you can run it either way depending on what you're doing as far as any kind of cameras and such. So let's see what this baby does. So the thing with BQE and why I built the Squeak and why I'm building a 3-inch and a 5-inch of BQE quads is something about them. For me, they just float. They're the smoothest floating frames that I've flown. And basically I have one radio with 54 models on it and a second radio with 25 models on it, to give you an idea of how many I've flown. So just to me, they just, everything about them floats, and they're just so smooth. I mean, if I look at this footage, and granted I'm not, a super pilot, and I've said a million times I'm not Ladrib, that's one special pilot there. I do the best I can, but even for me, and maybe if you've seen enough of my footage, you can see how much just smoother and just silkier the flight characteristics are of this frame. These are the same parts as another quad I've used, and it doesn't fly like this one does. It's just something about BQE. So in my personal flying, that's the decision I've made, is that BQE is going to be my fleet. That's what I'm going to fly. For my fun, when I'm not reviewing other things, that's not, of course, going to bias. If other people have good frames and good parts, it's going to be good. And I'll tell you it's good. And if it's crap, I'll tell you it's crap. But just for my own flying, my own fun flying, that is the choice I've made, is to go BQE. So you'll see a couple more build videos coming up. Mostly not really much about building the frame out and stuff, but it'll be about the parts I'm using in those reviews, but you'll likely see the frames when I'm adding parts onto BQE frames. So anyways, guys, thanks for coming, checking out the video. Don't forget to look below for all the links. If you're interested in any of the parts, BQE stuff, any of the parts I've used, you like the characteristics you're seeing of this flight, and want to build a Squeak in 2-inch, I will have a list of all the parts I used for you. And again, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Check all the latest giveaways going on the channel, and happy flying. Hey guys, thanks for stopping by and checking out the Quadcopter review. If you want to see more interesting reviews on FPV related stuff, take a look up here in the old right corner right there. You'll find links to all the rest of my reviews. If you want to get in on some of the best giveaways on YouTube, look over here. Don't forget to subscribe right here on my chin. And if you want to check out my flying only videos separated from the review channel, check that out right here. Thanks for coming. Don't forget to subscribe, and happy flying.